Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Serman, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This show is for those wanting to learn more about creating financial wellness. We're going to look at different life cycles, and we're going to explore them both financially and emotionally, because personal finances are more about, more about the emotions than the money itself. The healthier we are emotionally, the better and more sound financial decisions we tend to make. And we might be a little general in our discussion today. We would love to hear from you so that we can make it more relevant and more personal. And you can reach out to me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. Or you can post your comments and questions on Facebook and YouTube and any of the other platforms that you might be listening to us on. You know, divorce has a bit of a reputation for being contentious, and people often do things that they usually wouldn't do. We hear about these stories about the mudslinging and the antics that people do to their spouse, and it is unfortunate, but as unfortunate as this is, we do need to learn to protect ourselves through and beyond the process. So most people, when they think about protecting themselves, they kind of think about physically or emotionally protecting themselves. And yes, these are absolutely very, very important. However, I often run into people that have never given a thought about protecting themselves from a cybersecurity perspective. My guest today is Jonathan Steele. He is a partner at Beermann Law. And Beermann is one of the largest family law firms in the country. And I believe it's the largest one in Chicago right now. And you get the force of a large firm behind you, but I like the way that they operate in a team that's personalized for you. And so you get both the smaller feel and the power of a large firm. Not only is Jonathan an accomplished attorney with several areas of expertise, but he's had quite a bit of recognition as an emerging lawyer, as a super lawyer in Illinois, and is rapidly, and this is what I think is so important for today, but rapidly outpacing other attorneys in his knowledge and his skills around cybersecurity. Jonathan, I'm excited for this topic, and I'm excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Hirsch, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Absolutely. No, I think this is such an important topic. And as I said, people just don't think about it. And they should, and they need to. And I think things are evolving in such a way that they need to more and more. And I am going to ask, before we kind of dive into the meat of our discussion, just if you can give a little bit of a background for who you are, why you do what you do, and the passion that comes with that.
Sure. I'm a Chicago native. Your gracious introduction was great. I've been doing divorce law for about 10 to 11 years at this point. I started as a law clerk, clerking summers through high school and college, and continued on through law school. And then I got into a pretty deep interest in cybersecurity and privacy in general about halfway through COVID. And I found that there's a lot of overlap between that and the area of law that I practice in. So that's how I landed here today.
And you do hear more and more about these breaches of security. I mean, Social Security just had something going on. So it's not just a small firm or an individual that people need to think about. It really is that widespread, to institutions like cybersecurity, like Social Security. So I'm glad that you took on the topic. I'm glad that we're having the discussion. And safeguarding sensitive information obviously is incredibly important. And creating a strategy to protect yourself digitally is so important, especially going through a divorce, right? So for the less technically inclined, I'm going to ask, can you talk a little bit, just give us an overview. What is cybersecurity and why is it so important?
Yeah, you touched on it in your intro that people don't think about it, but it's a problem, and it's an increasing problem, and you don't think about it until it's too late. You don't think about it until you have a problem and you're trying to clean up after the fact. Right. Generally speaking, cybersecurity is just your efforts to protect yourself from digital threats. So to, be aware of your digital footprint, protect yourself on all of your different devices, your home network, and things like that to, prevent attacks and leaks and breaches.
So, yeah, and I think, you touched on devices, right? And I think that's such an important piece, because most people, I think, when they're thinking about it, they're thinking about email, or if they have a website, or, they're thinking about something like that. I think every family right now has how many cell phones and how many computers and how many tablets, and all of these pieces, are part of the puzzle that we need to think about. So I think, as a family law attorney with a focus on cybersecurity, what are some of the biggest risks individuals face when it comes to protecting their financial data during a divorce?
I think that's right. I think a lot of people don't have, self-hosted websites or self-hosted emails. So the attack surface for most people is just going to be their personal devices, whether that's an iPhone, an Android, a computer. And the most prevalent forms of vulnerability or attack nowadays is going to be phishing. So that's, somebody sends you a link to your email address, hoping that you click on it. And second to that is going to be what's called business email compromise. So it's going to look like it's somebody from your office. It may even have their name in the sender. But when you look closer at the sender address, the address isn't going to be the appropriate sender address. And so that's going to be one of the telltale signs of you're being attacked. And, it used to be a little bit more obvious, when you'd get an email telling you to wire money to a prince. That was pretty obvious. But now with the advent of artificial intelligence, hackers are able to use, a large language model like ChatGPT to write an email that sounds a lot more realistic. So these attacks are becoming more common and more effective.
I just two examples there. I have a tax practice along with the divorce coaching and CDFA work, and I find especially in the summer, so this is almost like a PSA as well as just information, in the summer where now the returns have been processed, there are a lot of fake IRS notices or emails that are going out claiming that there's an issue with the tax return that they found because it was audited. That's one example. I do have a client that sent me an email. I wish they hadn't, but they sent me an email saying, does this look legitimate? And when I looked at the what's called the address, as you pointed out, it didn't say irs.gov. It said irrs.gov. So they can even on a simple level try to hide things like that. And then add the layer of technology that's going on right now, with AI and ChatGPT and, looking at people's websites. If they have a blog for a business, they can write it in that kind of tone. There's so much going on from those perspectives that we do need to be careful. And, that these are people that sit and think about it all day. We don't do that. So they're coming up with creative ways that you and I are probably not even thinking about at this point, but need to as soon as we can.
As I'm listening to you, a couple of things came to mind as far as like a practical pointer for some of your listeners. For one, obviously looking at the sender address is key there. But another commonly overlooked protection mechanism, at least as it relates to the IRS, you can register for an IRS filing PIN, which will prevent anyone other than you or anyone other than your accountant that may have access to your PIN number from filing a tax return on your behalf. Right. Particularly during a divorce, when sometimes you'll see one of the spouses will file a joint return and the other spouse didn't know about it. If you have a filing PIN set up, it'll prevent that from happening. Right. And then, you mentioned earlier the Social Security number leak that is making the news like crazy right now. And people would be well advised to put a freeze on their Social Security numbers at the three major credit bureaus. That's going to prevent almost all opening of fraudulent lines of credit and things like that. And it's free and it's easy to do. It takes a matter of minutes. It's easy to put a thaw if you need to apply for a legitimate credit. And it's a very strong protection mechanism.
That's actually great information. And, for people who are wondering how to do it, as you said, it's pretty easy. I'm sure you could Google how, but you can go to their websites and do it. And the other piece to that is, you can freeze it, and then you can, as you said, you can use or unfreeze it, so to speak, do what you need to do, and then refreeze it. You're not limited to, like, you can do it once a year or something like that. It's something that you can unfreeze as you need and get access to your credit as you need. The other thing, obviously, is I think people don't do this in general. It's a good thing to check your credit report periodically, and periodically isn't every day or every week, obviously. But if you know that you're generally 720, 750 in your credit, and all of a sudden it's 660, there's chances something happened, right? So those are things that you can think about. The other one that we haven't really spoken about, and there's a little bit of a cost to it, probably about $20 a month, is there are monitoring services that can alert you as well should something happen, which often is useful as well from those perspectives as well.
Certainly, if you have the money, by all means. I personally don't always recommend that to people just because it's after the fact. They alert you after something has happened, whereas a credit freeze prevents something from happening. But it's a belt and suspenders sort of approach. It gives people peace of mind. It does offer, insurance. It helps you navigate the cleanup after the fact. But from a preventative perspective, the freeze is about as good as you can get. And it's important when you go on each of these credit bureaus' website to actually find the free freeze, because all of them are going to offer some sort of paid subscription, whether it's a credit lock or credit secure. And they're going to bury the freeze as low in that page as they can, but that's the one you're looking for.
Right. Good advice. Really good advice there. So how can people ensure their digital privacy is protected when they're going through a divorce? Especially, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of documents, there's a lot that gets shared, financial information, and, it goes to attorneys, it might go to accountants, it might go to the court. How do people protect themselves and ensure this privacy?
So, it's a multi-stage thing. It's security in layers, and it's a matter of triage. So, the first and most important thing you're going to need to do is set up a secure line of communication with your attorney. If your opposing party or your opposing counsel gets access to the communications that you're having with your lawyer, you're going to find yourself in a bit of a pickle. And so that's going to take the form of hardening your email. You can move to a more secure email provider that's cybersecurity focused. You can move to a more private email provider, or you can just harden the existing email accounts that you have by using two-factor authentication and the strongest method available. Second to that is going to be, making sure that when you're sending and receiving documents with your attorney, that you're doing it in a secure way. The easiest way, which is not the most secure way, is to just use traditional attachments. And, that's problematic because if, or when rather, your email account gets breached, if it's just a pile of attachments that have been sent between you and your attorney, that's just a treasure trove of information waiting to get leaked to somebody. And so, there are a number of free or paid secure transfer services that allow you to upload a file in an encrypted way. You're able to set an expiration timer on the link. You're able to limit who has access to the link. You can even password protect the link. And so if your spouse or anyone gets access to your email account down the road, what they're going to get is a bunch of expired links that link to nowhere, as opposed to just having, tax returns and bank statements and everything imaginable as attachments to peruse. So those are important ones. And then, I think if I could give a last one, I think it would be to try to harden your social media footprint as best you can. It's almost too much to ask nowadays to tell people get off of social media during your divorce. It's like asking someone to give up a limb, and I get that. So, to the extent you can, you got to try to make sure your accounts are private so that not just anybody has access to your photos and your timeline, but also, go through your friends and followers list, prune as many people that you don't recognize, people that are connected to your spouse, certainly your spouse, him or herself, to just make sure that you're not oversharing and sharing with people that may be getting information to your spouse. So I think those would be the three things that I would triage for people and recommend in the middle of a divorce case.
Right, and I'm glad you brought up email because I mean, from my tax practice perspective, I have a portal connected with my software, and I do have clients that say to me, "Well, can I just email you the documents?" And I'm not comfortable with that because I don't know what their security is. From that perspective, I always like them to upload it. When you were talking about the services, the free services, I just want to confirm. I'm assuming you're talking about like a Dropbox or a Google Drive, or a lot of attorneys use ShareFile or one of those, right? I mean, those are the kind of services that we're looking at. And as you said, a lot of them are free, and they give you quite a tremendous amount of storage to be able to put data in there, and they help you control, as you said, the access, how long. All these kind of things are very, very important. You can actually even limit whether they have the ability to kind of create stuff within the folder versus just upload. Things like that are all potentially very important for you to be able to make sure that you're protected. It is about time to take a break. I think this is probably a good spot. So I'm going to ask if you can just share a little bit. How can people get in touch with you? What's the easiest way? And then we're going to go to a break.
Sure. I live on my phone, so email is going to be the fastest way of getting in touch with me. And you can reach me at jsteele, Steele, at Beermann Law, Beermann law.com.
Great. And we'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. I am Hirsch Serman, your host, and we are talking today about protecting yourself. We're focusing mostly on the cybersecurity side of things, and my guest today is Jonathan Steele, a partner at Beermann. One of the things I like to do, because so much information hits so quickly, just recap a few of the things. I know I'm never going to get it all. But I do want to talk a little bit about what we spoke about. We start off with what is cybersecurity and why it's important. We spoke about creating a strategy. And a strategy sounds like this big involved, concept. It can be relatively simple in how are you just going to protect yourself. There are ways to do that. Obviously, the importance of it, the sharing of documents, the back and forth, and how much there's certain documents that go, between you and an attorney. It could go to the courts. It could go, you just need to obviously make sure that you are protected. You spoke about 2 or 3 different ways that somebody can protect themselves with email. I think email is probably the most common way that people are sharing information. So I thought that was very important. One of the points that you made, which I think was so important, people kind of react after the fact. Oh, it'll never happen to me till it happens to you, right? So freezing your credit with the Social Security breach is a big one that you had mentioned. Being a little bit more proactive. If you need some access to your credit, unfreezing and then refreezing your credit and protecting yourself. There are monitoring services, etc., that we spoke about. But as you said, the damage is done, and now you're repairing and trying to get back to where you were supposed to. The freezing of your credit really takes a different approach on your protection, and it's definitely ahead of the time. We spoke, as I said, about email, and you had mentioned specifically about the attachments. Yes, some people do put a password on an attachment or something like that, but going through a divorce, I think sometimes people, they know their spouse. They can sometimes even figure out their password, or they haven't changed a password, things like that. I think these are all things that are important that people need to remember and think about. And along a similar line to how we kind of ended before the break, I mean, being protected is always a good idea. There's no question about that. But what are steps that an individual can maybe take to safeguard, online banking, investment accounts, things like that? And, the one thing that comes to mind, about 2 weeks ago, I saw a documentary a little bit on this. And one of the things they said, which was kind of terrifying to me, was that if they have access to your photographs, even, they can almost make an AI avatar of you and send a video or live stream something where people are not always sure, is this the right person, or is this a real person that I'm speaking to that I know, or is it the AI form? Can you talk a little bit about protecting yourself with all of these kind of things? I think these are all things people need to consider.
The traditional form of securing your online banking is just going to be strong, unique passwords. Password 123 is not going to cut it. Even if you're ending it with an exclamation point, a hacker is going to be able to, using an automation, guess that in a matter of seconds. So using a password manager to generate your passwords is going to be a much stronger way of going about it. Using unique passwords is very important because it's about compartmentalization and damage mitigation. So in the event you're hacked and somebody gets access to your Chase password, for instance, if only Chase uses that password, then you can change your password to Chase and move on with your day. If you're using the same password everywhere, you have a lot of cleanup to do, a lot more than if you're using unique passwords. So that's number one. Then there's going to be two-factor authentication, and that comes in many forms. Most people have heard of it at this point. I don't know how many people are actually using it, but I would encourage everybody to use it. And it comes in the form of SMS or text message based two-factor authentication. It comes in the form of TOTP or authenticator app based two-factor authentication. And then in the most secure form is going to be a hardware security key, which is going to be the strongest way you can go. And not all banks are going to offer that. So to the extent you have the ability to do a little shopping around and look for banks that prioritize cybersecurity, look for a bank that offers that. And sometimes that's going to be only accounts that have brokerage components to them. So like a Morgan Stanley, maybe a Wells Fargo, things like that, as opposed to Chase. And some of the more commercial or some of the more consumer focused accounts that are just checking and savings, those are likely going to be SMS or text message based two-factor authentication, just because from a customer service perspective on their end, it's easier. It results in fewer lockouts, and so it's easier for them to administer. But that's the least secure form. Because you're vulnerable to what's called a SIM swap attack, where somebody calls up your cellular provider, Verizon, AT&T, and they pretend to be you. And they say, I got a new phone. I need you to port my number over to this new SIM card. And now all of a sudden that person is getting all of your text messages. So that would include the two-factor authentication code that was sent to you and now to them by SMS text.
It looks like we have a little bit of a freeze here talking about freezes. But I think just some of the things to reiterate there that are so important. One of the big ones is I've had clients actually say to me, I just don't want to have to deal with getting a text and putting in a code. And I always say to them, do you have health insurance? Do you have life insurance? And you pay sometimes a lot of money for those. This is the 30-second insurance policy to make sure that it's you. And it could be significantly more money that's going out the door without having some of this protection. So I think even on the lowest level, do it. It's absolutely worth your while. I think these are the things people aren't always thinking about. We've become such a of convenience kind of society, but we don't always think about what are we giving up or what protection are we losing if we go with the easiest route. So
that's a very important point. People are they're allergic to the friction of it, right? So even clients that you make use a secure portal for documents, they're annoyed, right? For the most part, unless they're security minded and privacy focused, they're going to be annoyed. It's just one extra step as opposed to attaching an email. And two-factor authentication is similar, whether you're getting a code via text message or via an app. It's just one extra step, and it annoys some people. But thinking about the back end, thinking about how long cleanup is going to take and what kind of emotional toll that's going to take on you, it's going to be tenfold the amount of time that goes into trying to clean up, money that was lost, identity that was leaked. So, a pound or an ounce of prevention is obviously worth a pound of a cure in that scenario.
And I will say the one thing I'm happy to see in this realm is go back 5 years ago, none of my I don't want to say none, very few of my clients were asking me, do you have a safe, secure way for me to get you the documents? 10 years ago, nobody was even thinking about this. For sure not. None of my clients. I do get more and more clients, over the last couple of years that have asked me those kind of questions, even before I've offered, like, this is how I do my process to get your documents. So there is a little bit more, again, the last thing you want is to become conscious because you've just had to go through 3.5 or 4 years to reinstitute all of your credit and your bank accounts and everything else. And, got your name back and your credit back and everything else. And it can take that long. And who knows, it can take even longer if you're not, if you really breached and they really do a lot of damage. So I definitely think that 30-second extra, or it's probably not even that long, to get into your bank account once every 3 weeks is more than worth it, to say the least. How do you see the role changing or evolving over time for cybersecurity? If you look at a year ago versus today, I'm sure there's been changes. And somebody starting a divorce, a divorce can be 8 months, 18 months. Some of them go longer. But where do you see this evolving to, and how do you see this going, in cases where, especially where there are disputes around the finances and they're so central to the divorce proceedings and the settlements?
I think it's just going to get more and more dire. The attacks themselves are going to be similar, but it's just going to become more frequent, more common. And so, it's especially now with the rapid introduction of artificial intelligence, it's making everything easier for evildoers. It's making everything easier to appear to be a legitimate person. You can generate a very lifelike image, a very lifelike video. And it's, that type of like deep fake technology is going to take people by surprise. Yeah. And so, it's going to be a similar attack surface. It's just going to be more common. It's going to be more frequent. And so it's not, when people think, I don't have a lot of money, or I'm not an interesting person, so I'm not likely to be the victim of one of these attacks. They're thinking too small. It's not, an attacker is not necessarily looking for the Bill Gates or the Mark Cubans because maybe they have a little bit better cyber posture to begin with. They're looking for an easy attack surface. And so you don't need to be the most secure. You don't need to be the most private. And cybersecurity and privacy is not a light switch. It's not one day you're insecure, the next day you're secure. It's a continuum, and there's little steps you can take along the way. There are little things you can do on a daily basis to make yourself a little bit more secure, adding as little friction as possible. And it's really just about being more secure than the person in the house next door to you, because they are looking for an easy target. And so they're looking for as little work as possible to get into someone's bank account or get into someone's identity. And so if you're a harder target than the person next to you, they're going to move on to the person next to you. So, whether you're in the middle of a divorce dispute or not, it's going to be a similar attack surface. It's going to be a similar threats that you're facing. It's just maybe your stakes are going to be a little higher if you're in the middle of a divorce. And so, I think over time, it's just going to continue to increase in terms of frequency.
I agree 100%. And the only thing I can really add or supplement to that is it's like being in a parking lot, right? If somebody is trying to steal a car, they walk to a door and it's locked. They go to the next door right next to it, right? If you've got a little bit of a hardened security, they're just going to move to the next one. The other thing for people, I think, just to think about is, as you said quite a bit earlier in the show, it used to be very obvious, I'm, a prince in Nigeria, wherever they were sending them from, and I need a contact in the US, and I think you perfect. Like, okay, how did you get, it's so obvious, right? I think the complexity of these schemes are going to just grow and become so much more lifelike and real. And that's just, I think, something else. So I think with that, I think it's great. Just, can you share a quick you know, cautionary tale of something that you've experienced. Obviously, scrub the sensitivity of data, but that people can just kind of get a sense of, you know, this is something that happened and this is real. And then we probably got to start wrapping up because these shows go way too quickly. So.
Yeah, you know, I was involved in a maintenance termination proceeding. So for the listeners that don't know what maintenance is, it's what was formerly known as alimony in the state of Illinois. So basically spousal support. And one of the bases for terminating the maintenance was that the recipient was cohabitating with an unrelated adult male. And the evidence that was able to be presented to establish the cohabitation came through effectively oversharing on social media. So the recipient was posting in real time photos of what they thought was going to be private, I guess. You know, travel with their significant other. They were posting photos of dining out with their significant other. They were posting basically their life in real time with their significant other. And what resulted from that was the maintenance was terminated because they were oversharing, because they weren't cognizant of who had access to the photos that were being shared. And so, you know, that person lost a significant amount of income that was supposed to continue on for a significant amount of time due to oversharing on social media. So, you know, just posting photos, posting real time, it poses a lot of dangers, both physical, digital, financial. You know, if you're on vacation and you're posting photos in real time from the beach, you're telling anybody that's looking at your social media feed that, you know, your home is empty. And so maybe it's a physical attack target. Maybe you're feeding information to your spouse or your ex-spouse about you're on a vacation. Maybe you're wasting money and they want that money back. Maybe you're traveling with a significant other, and so you might lose your right to maintenance. Maybe you're posting photos somewhere other than Instagram, and you're not cognizant of the metadata that's attached to your photos, and that has your GPS coordinates and the time it was taken and the date it was taken. And so, you know, that would be a cautionary tale, I guess. The person that was receiving the maintenance and lost it because of that, I'm sure would be eager to share with people the dangers of oversharing on social media.
Right. And you know, on the flip side, this is something that I haven't experienced, but I can imagine on the flip side of that, if somebody's constantly, you know, saying poverty, 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 I need more maintenance or I need more child support or whatever it might be. And then they're going on, you know, Cayman's vacation for 2 weeks. Obviously, that can work against you in the same way. Just the flip side of, you know, shutting down any, you know, requests that you might have for additional money. So yeah, definitely. I think those are such important pieces, and not just the pieces of the maintenance, but, you know, we were talking about how cybersecurity can flow into whether it's physical or financial security. As you said, you know, I'm on a 2-week vacation, I'm away from home. You know, it's an invite to people who see that on you know, on social media. That's crazy.
That's right. I want to say, you know, earlier you made a great analogy that I think is important for people. The parking lot analogy is spot on in my view. If I'm looking at 2 cars in a parking lot and one of them is a Rolls Royce and the other one is a beat up old car, I might choose the beat up old car if I want to break into it, because I'm pretty sure that Rolls Royce is going to have a more sophisticated alarm system. And so if I don't want to draw attention to myself, I'm going to go for the easier target there. So I think the takeaway should be you just need to be a little bit more secure. You don't need to be the most secure to protect yourself.
I like that. That's a good way to wrap up. But definitely the point there is do something to protect yourself and don't assume it's being done by your email carrier or whomever it might be. So, you know, one more time, Jonathan, if you don't mind, just share how people can get in touch with you. And obviously, I'm encouraging people to reach out, not just on the cybersecurity piece. Jonathan has tremendous skill set and a tremendous team. So if you have any questions, I would recommend reaching out, and I'm going to let you share your info.
Thank you. It would be jsteele@beermannlaw.com is my email address. The best way to get a hold of me, and that's JSTEELE@beermannlaw, BEERMANN law.com.
And thank you. I appreciate this is like an ever evolving topic. I'm sure if we spoke 6 months from now, there's going to be some more tips or some more things that are out there on what you got to look for. So I appreciate you sharing your insights in this. I am Hirsch Serman, the host of Financial Wellness Hour. Please reach out to me on my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. You can reach out for questions with Jonathan if you didn't get his information, or just to me if you need. And I want to thank CC Schatz, as always, the producer of the show, for the magic she does behind the scenes there. I look forward to you joining me in 2 weeks on my next show, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you for joining us.